Craig?
No, Your Honor. No additional impact statements at this time.
Understanding what I've heard, I think scoring 15 points for OB5 is appropriate.
Okay. May I make an argument then, just so my record is clear, Your Honor?
Sure.
So, first, I would rely on the Court of Appeals opinion in People versus Jaber, which where they expressly addressed this issue as a quote from People versus Bailey. And at the time, the sentencing court heard the following information from the murder victim's wife, and said that the couple had been together for 36 years. They would have celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary, but for the murder. The victim's wife also said that she had forgiven the defendant, even though her husband lost her son, they lost a brother, a grandfather, and a great-grandfather. Later, the victim's wife told the court that she prayed the court would impose the sentence that the defendant deserved. After hearing this information, the court scored 15 points, and the Court of Appeals in People versus Bailey has also upheld in People versus Jaber, ruled that although the victim's wife clearly expressed grief following her husband's death, there was no evidence presented to the court to show that the experience prevented the type of serious psychological trauma contemplated in MCL 777.35. Moreover, Judge, I would also rely on the Criminal Code for Criminal Procedure, which is MCL 777.22, where it outlines offense variable scoring and says that scoring of offense variables 5 and 6 are for homicide, attempted homicide, conspiracy, or solicitation to commit homicide, or assault with intent to murder. Which means that, Judge, for this court to assess points for OB5 in this particular situation, the court would have to find that serious psychological trauma was sought and or necessary pursuant to MCL 77.35. So that's the nature of my objection, Judge, is that the testimony that was provided doesn't even mention the term psychological trauma or that any psychological treatment was sought. It's imperative, in my opinion, that I make this objection because it changes my client's sentencing guidelines from 19 to 47 months to 18 to 30 months, which means essentially that if the court did not score these points, that my client would be sentenced at the top of the guidelines.
Mr. Craig?
Your Honor, I believe in terms of further counsel saying the Jaber case, an unpublished opinion is persuasive at best, not controlling on this court, and the court can certainly take note of those arguments, but is not bound by an unpublished opinion. I believe based on the information the court has received in terms of testimony from both Ms. Phillips and Ms. Clark in reference to the trauma that was experienced by both of these individuals and articulated in the letter form from the children of the Phillips family, documenting in terms of memories that they cannot erase and pain that they are continuously experiencing. I believe the appropriate scoring for this offense variable is in fact 15 points, and I would ask the court to maintain that at this time.
Right. So, I mean, Ms. Phillips indicated she cries every day. She indicated particularly the impact that it had on her child, Harmony. I think that is certainly distinguishable from the Jaber case where what I heard you read, Mr. Clements, made no reference to psychological impact as it did in this case. So I'm going to score 15 points for OB5 in each case. So with respect to Mr. Roy Goodman, the guidelines are at 19 to 47, correct?
19 to 47, correct, Your Honor.
And with respect to Mr. Lena Goodman, the guidelines are 19 to 38, correct?
Correct.
Anything else, Mr. Crago?
Just very briefly from the people, Your Honor, I certainly cannot improve upon or expand the record in reference to the pain and suffering that the Phillips family has endured. The court has heard from Ms. Shante Phillips and Ms. Roxanne Clark, and by way of letters from the victim, Mr. Harold Phillips' family. in terms of his minor children. Your Honor, this is a tragic case in terms of the loss of life of a 35-year-old man who was returning home that evening at the bus stop at Longacre in West Chicago when he was mauled by the Goodman's dogs at that intersection, Your Honor. And in reference to the types of cases we routinely see in this metropolitan area over the past decade or 2 decades, there is this painful frequency of dog-related mauling cases. And I'm thankful that Ms. Phillips Lachante has some closure in this particular case, and that the words of the smallest children in that family could be heard by the Goodmans, as Mr. Goodman is anticipating serving a prison term in the Michigan Department of Corrections, and Ms. Trevina Goodman has an upcoming in terms of responsibilities to this court for a number of years, that the words of those children will continue to ring in their minds as they move forward in this case, as they think about their actions and their inactions in this case that has led to the tragic death of Harold Phillips. And I would ask the court to impose the sentence agreement that has been entered into between the parties and impose the 30-month jail term, a 30-month prison term for Mr. Roy Goodman, and the probationary term of 3 years with court oversight for Ms. Trevina Goodman in this matter, Your Honor. Thank you.
Judge, on behalf of Mr. Goodman, I'll just say this. At my firm, we've been fortunate enough to serve a lot of clients. Mr. Goodman is an easy person to advocate for. He's an easy person to advocate for because although his actions were reckless in this particular case and it caused someone to lose their life, he's an individual that has always taken accountability. He didn't drag this process out. He hasn't complained. He's never he's never asked me to seek ways to evade responsibility for what his role in this particular incident was. And I'd ask the court just to focus in on his actions as the incident took place. When he realized that his dogs were missing, he went looking for them. When he saw that the gentleman was injured or in a vulnerable position and that his dogs were attacking them, he pulled the dogs off. He contacted 911. He tried to help this man, even though he knew that he was wrong. When the detectives came to his house to learn what had happened on that particular day, he didn't contact me. He didn't contact another attorney. He didn't exercise his right to remain silent. He explained to them, I let the dogs out. I shouldn't have. I knew that the latch was broken. It was just cold. I thought that they would come back in, and when they didn't, he went looking for them. He's extremely sorry for what happened, for what this family has experienced. He wants me to express his condolences, and I believe that his actions demonstrate that he is remorseful from the very moment that this incident happened. It's unfortunate. It's tragic. My client is not a monster. He's not a bad person, and I'm confident that he'll go into custody. He'll avail himself to whatever programs that he's qualified for. I'd ask that when the court has an opportunity to evaluate him for said programs, that he be admitted in, because he's an individual that has demonstrated that he appreciates, one, the veracity of his actions, and two, his responsibility to reform his conduct, and he'll do that. So I'd ask the court to follow its comments. Thank you.
Mr. Hyde?
Your Honor, just to ask the court to adopt the sunset recommendation, but we can't offer anything additional in terms of that, given that there's some unresolved misdemeanors in the 36th District Court related to this matter, as well as some pending civil cases. So we're going to decline to offer any further statement.
Right. Mr. Goodman, anything you want to say?
Just to the Phillips family, I'm so sorry. I wish it wouldn't have happened. I'm so sorry.
And Mr. Rita Goodman, is there anything you want to say? I can't hear you.
No.
All right. As it relates to Mr. Roy Goodman, the sentence of this court, that he be sentenced to 30 months to 15 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections with 4 days jail credit. Additionally, you're to pay restitution in the amount of $9,220 jointly and severally with the co-defendant Trevina Goodman to the family of Harold Phillips, in particular Ms. Shawn T. Phillips. You must execute a wage assignment to pay restitution if you're employed and miss 2 regularly scheduled payments. You're to pay crime victims assessment in the amount of $130. You're to pay court costs in the amount of $1,300. The State Court Administrator's Office has determined that $1,300 is the average cost in support of a case that proceeds through it, and it covers salaries and benefits for court personnel, goods and services necessary for the operation of the court, and necessary expenses for the operation and maintenance of court buildings and facilities. You're also to pay $68 state costs. With respect to Ms. Trevina Goodman, this is case number 24-1711-02-FH. Ms. Trevina Goodman is sentenced to 3 years of probation, along with the following conditions. You should not violate any criminal law of any unit of government. You should not leave the state without the consent of the court. You must make a truthful report to the probation officer monthly or as often as the probation officer may require, either in person or in writing, as required by the probation officer. You must complete a psychological evaluation when you're referred by the field agent. You must complete mental health, domestic violence/battery intervention or the recommended treatment following assessment by a qualified community-based service provider. You shall notify the probation officer immediately of any change of address or employment status. You're to pay restitution in the amount of $9,220, and you must execute a wage assignment to pay restitution if you're employed and miss 2 regularly scheduled payments. That's joint and several with Roy Goodman. You pay crime victims assessment in the amount of $130. That restitution is to be paid at the rate of $500 per month. Pursuant to MCL 791.225A, you must pay a $30 supervision fee for each month of supervision, or $60 per month for each month of supervision when being supervised with an electronic monitoring device. You're to pay court costs in the amount of $1,300. Again, the State Court Administrator's Office has determined that $1,300 is the average cost of this court of case that proceeds through it, and it covers salaries and benefits for court personnel, goods and services necessary for the operation of the court, and necessary expenses for the operation and maintenance of court buildings and facilities. And you may perform 100 hours of community service in lieu of court costs. You must forfeit the bond payment for monies owed on any court-ordered costs, restitution, and/or fines. You must consent to an assignment of wages until court-ordered assessments are paid in full unless otherwise directed by the field agent. You must surrender all tax refunds for monies owed on any court-ordered restitution, crime victims assessments, costs, and supervision fees. You're to pay $68 state costs. You shall not own, possess, or harbor any animals during your probation term. You're to pay restitution in an amount to be determined for the funeral. For the $9,000, that's for, was that for medical costs or was that for?
Your Honor, can we address that point of restitution?
Sure.
The people would ask that you strike the prayed for restitution, the amount contained inside the PSIR. The Phillips family, through the generosity and the love and support of the community, has to date, through a GoFundMe page in memory of Harold Phillips, has raised over $80,000 for the Phillips family in support of the tragic loss of Harold. In addition to that, $8,000 from the Michigan Crime Victim Rights Fund fee was distributed in the month of October of this year. So there is no prayed for restitution in this case for the burial expenses or restitution for the Phillips family.
Okay. All right, I'll strike the restitution requirements for both defendants then. Any substantive probation violation will result in a sentence of 18 months to 15 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections, and you shall perform 80 hours of community service at a homeless shelter, soup kitchen, or food pantry in the city of Detroit. You shall begin your community service within 30 days. All costs and fees are due at the time of sentencing unless otherwise indicated. Mr. Goodman and Ms. Goodman, You have the right to request leave to appeal from the Court of Appeals. If you're unable to afford an attorney to prepare post-conviction motions or perfect an appeal, this court will appoint an attorney for you at public expense. Will provide that attorney with such portions of the transcript as that attorney may require to prepare post-conviction motions or perfect an appeal. You're further advised if you wish to file an appeal or motion and request the appointment of an attorney must be made in writing and filed with the clerk of this court within 42 days of today's date. Mr. Goodman, do you understand your appellate rights?
Judge, he's fixing his initials to the form now.
Mr. and Mrs. Goodman, do you understand your appellate rights?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you have any questions about your appellate rights?
No.
Anything else at this time?
Nothing for the people, Your Honor.
Not front of the fence.
Nothing from you now.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice weekend. Best to the family of Carol Phillips.
Congrats.
Calling case number 24-1711-02-FH. Information regarding this document found under case number 24-1711-01-FH.
The system's rigged, man, it's time to break free. Eyes wide open, gotta